So the pandemic hits, and right away, we got everybody staying from home. Kids were going to school. You got people working from home. And a lot of people were talking about the idea, like, hey, wow, there's a huge lowering of the amount of greenhouse gases being produced by the burning of gasoline because of it, right? Because and if you did any driving during the pandemic, that there was nobody on the road.
Yeah.
So I was thinking this is going to be a really great test to see how well it'll work when we switch over to electric cars, supposedly because we won't be burning the fossil fuels for the energy. But then I was reading, and it turns out that it really wasn't that big of a difference. Didn't really help that much.
Yeah. So there's a few things to unpack there. So first of all, the effect of the pandemic on global CO2 emissions was to reduce it by about 5%. That was it. That was the pandemic.
Not a lot. Not what you would think.
Right. I mean, we had to create electricity. Industries were still chugging along. We were still growing food. The transportation sector is about 25% of carbon emissions. And so there was a decrease in that, but it was 5%. But what they were saying was that, well, perhaps carbon emissions will have peaked in 2019. 2019 was the greatest amount of CO2 emissions ever. They figured by the time the pandemic recovers, maybe we'll have enough of a transition to green energy that CO2 emissions will never get back to the 2019 levels. That was the hope.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
In 2022, we exceeded 2019 levels. We rebounded and even surpassed 2019. So now last year was the greatest amount of CO2 emissions that the world has ever seen, about 37 billion metric tons of CO2.
Well, that's annoying.
That's a lot of CO2.
Yeah, it's like as if they don't know that there is something really horrible coming very soon, right? Okay, so that leads me to the question of this whole idea, like when we go all electric, like it's going to really be great for the environment. And like even if we do go all electric, and we will eventually, for the most part, most, even big trucks will probably be electric at some point. It's not going to have this massive paradigm shift in the amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted into the atmosphere because of what? Industry? Like what were you saying?
So the transportation sector, which is all transportation, is about 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about transportation. It's still a huge chunk. It's a quarter of CO2 emissions, and that's cars, trucks, but also trains, planes, and boats, all transportation. It's not going to be, first of all, that rapid a transition, because even if we were selling 100% electric cars today, which we're not, it's still only in the single digits, it would take 20 years, to turn over the auto fleet. So it's going to be 30 to 40 years of slowly transitioning from gasoline to electric vehicles, assuming that we really push that way. And there might be, you could imagine it'll be like that last 5% of the gasoline vehicles, the internal combustion engine cars, are going to be hard to get rid of for people in, remote areas or locations where it's just going to be hard to make the transition to electric vehicles. So if we could rapidly shift over to 95% electric vehicles on the road, what impact would that have on greenhouse gas emissions, on CO2? So one of the benefits comes from the fact that the electric vehicles are more efficient than ICE vehicles. You get more miles per unit of energy than you do with gasoline.
So overall, less greenhouse gas.
Yeah, it's just more efficient. Yeah, it's just more efficient. And the other benefit, of course, is that you're not burning gasoline to drive the vehicle, which is directly producing CO2. But then the question is, well, where are you getting the electricity from that you're using to recharge the car?
Right, because today a lot of our electricity comes from coal-fired plants.
It's still a lot is fossil fuel. It's still about 65% fossil fuel, which is coal and natural gas. Natural gas is a lot better than coal, but they're still both fossil fuels.
So when we zoom out, right? Yeah. You zoom out and you go, okay, right now, no matter what, you could be using all electricity for everything in your house and drive an electric car and everything's electricity. That electricity, 65% of it is coming from coal.
Yeah.
Which is no good. But wait, and the other thing is that
fossil fuels.
Well, fossil fuels, but we're waiting for the grid to somehow be supplied green energy, right?
So yeah, so at the same time, like over the next 30, 40 years that we're converting the transportation fleet to all electric, we have to also be converting all of our energy production over to low CO2 production. So we have to be converting coal and then natural gas power plants into other things: wind, solar, nuclear, hydroelectric, geothermal.
Yeah.
Right. So if we do that over the next 30 years, this is the idea: by 2050, not only will we have mostly an electric car and truck fleet, but we'll also have mostly a low or zero carbon energy production infrastructure. If we're still burning coal in 2050, it doesn't matter what kind of car you're driving that much, right?
Yeah.
The benefits really come if you're also using green electricity to recharge the car.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of depressing when you think about it, because, there was like the subtext of like the electric car, coming online, and the battery life is getting better, and a lot of car manufacturers, like this year, 2023, they're all in the game now.
Yeah.
We're even seeing electric SUVs, but it doesn't matter because the freaking electricity is not coming from the right place.
It's necessary, but not enough by itself.
Yeah.
We need to also
of course,
over.
but it's not. So
Yeah.
my feeling is, emotionally, when I look at this, it's not happening anywhere near fast enough.
It needs to be happening fast. It's not going to happen. It depends on what you mean by fast enough. It's not going to be happening fast enough in order to guarantee that we avoid any of the tipping points in terms of climate change. But it is happening fast enough that there's a chance that we could avoid the worst of it. So we have to just, the more quickly we do it, the better the chance that we'll avoid the worst climate outcomes. But I have to say, I've been driving now an electric vehicle for a couple of years. I just think they're better cars. I mean, people obviously have different opinions about that, but it's a great driving experience, in my opinion. You never have to go to a gas station. You charge right up at home. The cars are, handle wonderfully. They does feel like you're driving the car of the future. There's a lot of advantages, a lot of bells and whistles that come along with it. We just have to build out the infrastructure fast enough to keep up with the increasing use and demand, so that everyone can have a place to charge their car.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, I'm not seeing charging stations pop up like I thought we would be seeing.
Well, they're there. If you do drive an electric car and you look for them, and
so you know that
that they're there, and you can see they come up on your map when you're traveling. And there's not enough. It'd be nice when they become ubiquitous. There's like a gas station. There's going to be one within a quarter mile. You're going to run into one. But there's enough at this point in time. That's one of the things that Tesla did very well, is they built out their infrastructure, and they put the Tesla recharging stations in shopping centers, and strip malls.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so that whenever we've had to recharge on the road, there's always something to do for that 15, 20 minutes while you're recharging.
What do you do?
You just go shopping.
All right, so but do you ever stay in the car and just watch Netflix or something? Like, what do you?
No, so I mean, usually if it's a pit stop, by the time you go to the bathroom, get your ice cream, get back to the car, you're done, right? And if you don't have to do a pit stop, there's usually a store you can pop into 15 minutes, you come back and you're done. So
you're not feeling it?
Yeah, okay. So far, I've never felt like, oh my God, I'm waiting around for my car to recharge. And again, 99% of the recharging you're going to do is where you park the car, whether that's at work, in your own driveway, garage, or wherever. This is more just to, like, you're going on a long trip, you need a place halfway there to recharge. But we'll get there, and there's a lot of money in the Inflation Reduction Act, for cheap recharging, and the infrastructure bill for recharging stations, and that will be necessary also. There's a lot to do. Think about it. We're trying to massively turn over an industry, as quickly as possible. That's a lot, and there's a lot of infrastructure, and the industries ride on infrastructure like that. The reason that the internal combustion engine won out against the electric car 120 years ago was because of infrastructure. We didn't have the electricity infrastructure at the time. And so that was a big reason why the gasoline engine won out in the first place. We could have been driving electric cars for the last 100 years if the electricity infrastructure was just a couple of decades ahead of where it was.
I mean, we need to reinvent our grid right now. It has to happen now.
We need to reinvent multiple industries.
Yeah.
It's going to take time, but 30 years, we can get mostly there in 30 years if we keep doing what we're doing and keeping all of the plans and commitments that we've made, but it's going to be close.
Yeah.
Cutting it close.